Now it's time for what my producer has decided to call Happy Hour, because for once I'm talking about something that should make me happy. Whiskey. I've got some Scotch to try in a moment, but not before I've waded through the drama, get it, around Jeremy Hunt's budget next week. Polling by the Scotch Whisky Association found that more than 2/3 of Scots want the Chancellor to cut taxes for the whisky industry. And I'm joined now by Director of Strategy at the Scotch Whisky Association, Graham Littlejohn. Graham, welcome to the Independent Republic. Good to see you. We've got a lovely array of different Scotch here. Tell us, first of all, about the duty that is paid on Scotch whisky and what you think Jeremy Hunt might do next week, if anything.
Quite simply, the tax on Scotch whisky in the UK is the highest in the G7 developed economies. It is double the average across the EU. It is far too high.
Right.
So we've been calling on the Chancellor to cut duty next week in his budget. It would only be the 5th time in the last 100 years that duty has been cut on Scotch whisky. So it's an opportunity that doesn't come along very often, and it's one the Chancellor should seize with both hands.
Because it's still one of Britain's biggest exports, isn't it, Scotch? I mean,
absolutely. Last year, £5.6 billion worth of Scotch whisky exported to 180 countries around the world.
Yeah.
43 bottles of Scotch whisky are exported from Scotland every single second.
Yeah.
Now think about that.
Every second?
Every single second. And this is an industry which has been 500 years and more in the making, but now it's a global iconic industry. It's enjoyed by millions of people around the world, but we tax it very heavily here at home, and we should address that in the budget next week.
Yeah, and we've got some, I've got a glass here in front of me. I'm not quite sure what's in it, but I'm assuming some of it will be whiskey. I hope not all of it is, or else the second hour of the show is going to be very interesting.
Well, this is a delicious Scotch whisky highball, blended Scotch whisky with a bit of ginger ale.
Okay.
Very simple cocktail, less than 2 units of alcohol in that, but the bizarre thing about the duty system which the Chancellor has employed is that despite the fact that this contains less alcohol than your typical pint of beer or cider, it's taxed 4 times more.
Wow.
And that's something that needs to be addressed as well.
And does that affect the retail sales in bars as well as in restaurants, and not just in sort of off sales?
It puts the industry at a competitive disadvantage when the tax level is so high, so exorbitant.
Right.
It does put the industry at a competitive disadvantage. We need Scotch whisky to be treated more fairly in the tax system, and the Chancellor has an opportunity to do that next week.
This is a very refreshing drink.
Moorish.
It's very Moorish, and it tastes, it's almost like, it's taking me back to my childhood days of drinking ginger beer. Which in those days wasn't alcoholic, of course.
Well,
but it doesn't taste very strong either.
People are enjoying Scotch whisky in different ways, in cocktails like this, but also traditional drams like we have here.
Yes.
You can enjoy Scotch whisky in lots of different ways, and that's the benefit of having a world-class spirit like Scotch whisky. It's very versatile. You can have it in any way you want.
Yes.
But people are paying over the odds for it because of the budget and because of the tax
it's also become something of a, I don't know, I'm not going to say cottage industry, but I mean, as well as all of the big brands that we know about, you know, and the big distillers, there's a lot of smaller, you know, like Speyside and you know, different parts of the country doing it now, right?
Absolutely. There are 147 operating Scotch whisky distilleries now all over Scotland. It's an important manufacturing industry with all the bottling halls in the Central Belt, but importantly in the rural and island communities. The industry is a vital sector for those parts of the country which have fewer economic opportunities, and that's why we need to support it. That's the opportunity the Chancellor has next week.
Yeah. Now, I've got another little glass over here, which I'm just going to reach over to get, because this is a wee nip, I presume, of... a wee dram of one of these bottles here. Is that the COP26 limited edition?
This is the COP26 limited edition. We made this specially for COP26 in Glasgow.
This could be the only good thing that came out of COP26.
We made it specially for that. Only 900 bottles were made. Very exclusive. All the world leaders who came to Glasgow got a bottle to take away with them.
Oh, that's nice.
And I don't know what you're getting there, Mike, but maybe some apple, maybe some cinnamon, a bit of vanilla.
A little bit smoky, maybe?
A little bit smoky at the end, absolutely. Good nose there, Mike, because there's a bit of peated whiskey in that as well.
Yeah.
And that gives you the little smoky flavour at the end.
Very nice. And so, I mean, as a general rule, it used to be that the Chancellor would get up with a glass of Scotch. But, of course, those days are gone. That's probably politically not the acceptable thing to do anymore. But in those days, we were a much more wealthy country, weren't we?
It would be a good omen if Jeremy Hunt did go to the dispatch box next week with a dram. Ken Clarke was the last Chancellor to do it in 1996. And do you know what he did then? He cut duty on Scotch whisky.
There you go. So he was on your side in those days. What do you actually expect to happen, though? I mean, Jeremy Hunt needs to get some people on side. He wants to try and make friends, I guess, on his budget statement. Well, I mean, he's got a lot of people he's got to help out.
Well, as you know, the Chancellor keeps the budget very close to his chest, but we've been saying cut duty because you get more revenue and you actually help to further reduce inflation. The 10% increase on duty, which the Chancellor implemented in August last year, has actually lost the Treasury £100 million in the last 6 months. Cutting duty in 2015, the last time it happened, increased revenue by £100 million in the first year.
Yes.
So you can raise revenue by cutting duty next week, and that's what you should do.
Right. And are there any sort of new countries that are importing more Scotch now than they did, say, 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. America's always been, for the last 20 years, has been the biggest market by value, but there's a lot of growing markets in Asia Pacific in particular. India is a massive market for Scotch whisky. Can get bigger if the UK agrees a trade deal with India in the coming weeks. We hope they do that because it would reduce tariffs on Scotch whisky, make it easier to import it into India. China is becoming a very important market for whisky now. It was £2 million 20 years ago. It's £200 million now. So huge opportunities for Scotch whisky, but it has to be made here at home.
Yes.
We need to support it here so we can be a global export into the future.
Incredible. Great to see you. Thank you, Graham. Well, we'll wish you luck with next week. We'll see what happens in the budget. Graham Littlejohn there, Director of Strategy at the Scotch Whisky Association.